What happens if you mix an anarchist, a fraudster, and a political troll all in one person and put him in a struggling F1 team? You get one of the most absurd, wild, and unforgettable stories in motorsport history. From trash-talking F1 bosses to literally setting his own car on fire when things didn't go his way. Get ready to meet the wildest F1 team owner ever. 1989. What a year. The Berlin Wall fell, and with it, the Cold War came to an end. In China, students were flooding the streets demanding democracy. And in South Africa, people were fighting to free Nelson Mandela and end apartheid. Meanwhile, the internet was just starting to wake up, and no one had the slightest idea how huge it was going to be.
IBM are hoping tonight to cash in on a new service called Prodigy. With a computer, a telephone hookup, and the right software, you'll be able to shop, trade securities, and catch up on the news right in your own home.
Oh, and Michael Jackson and Madonna? Yeah, they were running pop culture. But if you think F1 was chill during all this, not even close. F1 was totally blowing up with satellite TV coming in. Eccleston was running the show on the business side. The Senna versus Prost rivalry was everywhere.
I refuse to walk away from the fight.
Really monstrous decision to call Senna a dangerous driver.
And with the economy booming, tobacco companies were throwing tons of cash into F1. Plus, with turbo engines banned in '88, racing got a lot cheaper. You know what that means? F1 became the perfect business for teams, sponsors, and drivers.
Nowhere else can you get so close to the cars. Nowhere else is the noise so loud, and nowhere else are the colours so bright. Watch it on BBC television.
Massive exposure, and costs weren't too crazy. Everyone wanted to be there. In fact, between 85 and 91, there were 15 new teams in F1. Yep, you heard that right. 15! Back then, if you had some cash and could slap together a box for wheels, you were basically good to go. Most of these new teams were super sketchy, like some random dude who didn't know F all about F1 and just using it to promote his weird business. And they crash and burn out after a couple of years. At some races, there were as many as 39 cars trying to get in. It was so crazy that F1 had to start pre-qualifying because only 26 cars were allowed to actually race.
With a potential maximum of 39 cars going for 26 grid placings, FISA came up with a pre-qualifying formula. The 26 most successful cars would go straight into qualifying, leaving 13 cars to pre-qualify, going for 4 places in qualifying itself.
So yeah, it wasn't easy to actually get to race, but sometimes these random underdog teams would just sneak in and surprise everyone. Totally different vibe from today's F1, but honestly, I kinda love the idea of some random dude starting an F1 team and giving it a shot. If you hit subscribe and we get enough people, maybe I'll start one too and see what happens. A lot of these F1 masterminds started teams from scratch, and by scratch, I mean they hired people who weren't even mechanics or engineers, just random employees from other businesses, no clue how F1 worked, but somehow they thought they could go head-to-head with Senna. Total delusion. But then you had others who were a bit smarter. They just bought up smaller, cheaper teams from the lower categories and tried to level them up into F1. A bunch of those smaller teams were basically just sitting around praying for some rich guy to show up and take them to the big leagues. That was exactly the case with Onyx. They'd been kicking around in F2 and Formula 3000 through the 80s. So in 1987, they actually won the Formula 3000 championship with Stefano Modena. Not bad, right? So they figured, why not go all in and jump into F1 in '89, especially now that it wasn't insanely expensive anymore.
We put the proposal to them that we ran a junior Marlboro team. Unfortunately, right at a very late stage, the American arm of Philip Morris decided against it.
And that's when he appeared. The one, the only, the absolute legend. Meet Jean-Pierre Van Rossum. Not exactly the guy you'd picture as an F1 team boss.
He stepped up to the plate and gave us the opportunity to race what we thought was a good car. Yeah, I'll always be appreciative of what he did. How he did it, I don't know.
But who the hell was this man? Some shady billionaire? A financial scammer? A philosopher with a god complex? Well, yeah, kinda. Because he was all of those things at the same time. Believe it or not, Van Rossum was actually a well-known Belgian economist. As you'll see, the guy was basically a walking contradiction. He was a star economics student at the University of Ghent and made side cash writing other people's dissertations. Basically the academic version of a dealer. Then he got a scholarship to study under Lawrence Klein, a legit Nobel Prize winner who was pioneering the use of computers to predict market trends. Van Rossum took those skills to the US, started his own company, and then promptly lit it on fire trying to finance a heroin habit. He went bankrupt and even did time for fraud. Classic comeback story, right? After that, he came back to Europe like nothing happened and claimed he'd cracked the stock market with a magical algorithm called Moneytron, a supercomputer that could supposedly predict market moves with near perfect accuracy and make money while you sleep. Magical, right? But spoiler alert, Van Rossum's supercomputer didn't even exist. Big shocker, I know. Moneytron was basically a pyramid scheme, but how the hell did it actually work? Well, he took money from new investors by promising sky-high returns, and then used the money to pay off the older investors. So yeah, it was just a big old loop where newbies were unknowingly funding the OGs. The crazy part, it actually worked. Like, way too well. Van Rossum built up this image of himself as some kind of stock market guru, and people totally bought into it. He even claimed he was managing $7 billion in assets and managed to attract a ton of rich investors, including, wait for it, members of the Belgian royal family. I mean, when royalty's getting scammed, you know this guy had game. With all that cash rolling in, Van Rossum got filthy rich. Like, cartoonishly rich. He racked up over $500 million, which let him live the absolute dream. Well, his dream anyway. A luxury yacht, 2 private jets, 108 Ferraris, 7 castles, and of course, cocaine and heroin. See, the wild part is, Van Rossum actually was kind of an economic genius. But as you've probably figured out by now, he never used his powers for anything remotely ethical. His personality, of course, was a whole other circus. And in case the 108 Ferraris didn't tip you off, yeah, Van Rossum was really into motorsports. And somehow, I don't even know how, Bertrand Gachot, yep, the OGs of this channel know all about this guy's legendary career, ended up showing in the Onyx project.
Bertrand Gachot, he rang me and he said, look, I think I have a would-be backer for the problem. Would you consider running it?
And just like that, Van Rossum didn't hesitate for a second. He jumped on the opportunity and poured a ton of money into the team, before pulling off another move that was even more surprising. We'll get to that in a bit. At that point, Onyx already had Marlboro as a sponsor, but now they had another one. You already know which one. Onyx-Moneytron Formula 1 team. Honestly, this was great news for the team at the time. Now Onyx not only had enough money to actually take on the challenge of F1, but they also had one of the most unique liveries on the grid. Shortly after Van Rossum's mysterious sponsorship came on board, the team got its act together and started prepping hard for the 1989 season. Mike Earl, one of the original founders, stayed on as team principal. As for the drivers, they had Stefan Johansson, experienced ex-Ferrari and McLaren, and of course, Bertrand Gachot, making his official F1 debut. The team managed to get their hands on 4 Cosworth engines, Goodyear tires, and surprisingly, they even landed Alan Jenkins as technical director, who won 3 constructors titles and 2 drivers titles with McLaren. Do you reckon Van Rossum scammed him into joining Onyx or something? Honestly, wouldn't be that surprising. And while it seems like they were actually getting things together pretty well, yeah, no, not even close. By December 1988, just 3 months before the season started, they basically had nothing ready. Lots of stuff on paper, but in the real world, nada.
The biggest problem I think we had was the timescale. It was very late in happening, and prior to the first race, we'd done something like 9 all-nighters. So, yes, it was a baptism of fire, let's say.
To make things worse, the team suddenly tripled in size, which turned the whole operation into a logistical nightmare.
Stepping up to Formula 1 was a massive step. I mean, we went from something like 18 people to 75 overnight.
But hey, they didn't give up. They pulled themselves together, and with Jenkins leading the charge, they actually managed to get a car built in time for the season opener. Enter the Onyx ORE-1. Honestly, the car actually looked pretty decent. With Van Rossum throwing money at the project, the team seemed motivated and, on paper, had real F1 potential. But, as usual, the excitement and the planning didn't exactly match up with reality. The cars were only completed on the morning of their official launch, which just so happened to be the same day they were going to be flown out to Brazil for the first race of the season. So as you can probably guess, there was 0 time for testing, fine-tuning, or literally anything useful.
The Brazil thing was nuts. We went out there with the idea of running the pre-race test.
Arrived in Rio, we hadn't actually started the car.
Just a few days before the Brazilian GP, the team ended up going to some random go-kart track on the outskirts of Rio to do their first ever shakedown, the only time they actually ran the car before racing it for real.
So the first Onyx run of all time was on a hillside above Rio on a go-kart track.
It was ridiculous, but at least it proved that things worked.
Despite all of that, Van Rossum stayed positive. Finally. Formula 1, where the best of the best go wheel to wheel. And now, Onyx was one of them. Was the car ready? Were they gonna score points? Shock the world? Not exactly. At the season opener in Brazil, both Johansson and Gasho ended up dead last in pre-qualifying with mechanical problems, so they didn't even make it to the actual race weekend. And Van Rossum, like he was following some divine plan predicted by his magical Moneytron computer, he didn't panic at all when things looked like a total mess. Nope. He doubled down and went all in. He bought a majority stake in the team, dropped $50 million, and officially became the boss. Obviously, this was a huge lifeline for Onyx, who weren't exactly swimming in cash. And Van Rossum, oh, he had plans. Big ones. As you already can tell, he wasn't the type to blend into the background. He turned the F1 paddock into his personal runway, showing up with models dressed in Moneytron gear, making sure Onyx stood out and got people talking. It was all part of his grand strategy. Spend big, stand out, and turn heads, whether the car worked or not. Every now and then, stories would pop up in the media about how Van Rossum was trying to buy some of the top drivers on the grid, all to make Onyx look like a much bigger deal than it actually was.
He felt that if he kept saying things like that, then the sponsors would go, oh, this is a very serious team. You've got Prost coming and this coming, and then he thought he was doing the right thing.
Basically, he was using the exact same strategy he used with Moneytron. Sell a dream that doesn't exist and make it look way bigger than it really is. But hey, while Van Rossum kept doing his colourful businessman routine, the team actually started showing some signs of life. In Mexico, Johansson made it through pre-qualifying and ended up 21st on the grid, even ahead of Nelson freaking Piquet. Sure, he retired from the race with yet another mechanical issue, but hey, progress is progress, right? And how did Van Rossum celebrate this tiny step forward? By buying himself a $20 million business jet, obviously, because nothing says we finished 21st and retired like dropping 8 figures on a plane instead of on the team. Next up was the Phoenix GP, where Johansson again made it into the race, this time qualifying P19 on Saturday before retiring yet again on Sunday. Consistency, baby, just not the kind you want. In Canada, Johansson made it into the race again, but got disqualified after leaving one of the pit stops with the fuel hose still attached.
Across the set, they came up behind me to lap me. I got this thing flapping around behind the car, because they didn't know if you got left, right.
And he said, I kept looking in my mirror thinking, God, I must be going better than I thought. These guys aren't overtaking me.
Ferrari-esque. Yep, they literally sabotaged themselves that weekend. Then came France. They actually had great race pace. At one point, they were running P4 and P5 with Gasho ahead. But of course, bad luck struck again.
We were running really strong in the race, and then Bertrand retired.
Bert was unfortunate enough to have a battery terminal fall off or something. One of those awfully pathetic things that you scream about,
Still, Johansson managed to hold on to P5, scoring Onyx's first ever points in F1, which honestly was amazing. The next few races, pretty much back to the usual mix of not qualifying or making it in and retiring, or just finishing miles away from the points. Meanwhile, while the team kept stumbling along, all eyes started turning back to Van Rossum, and of course, not for the right reasons. See, around that time, Porsche announced they'd be returning to F1 as an engine supplier for the 1991 season. People got really hyped, and everyone expected them to bring some top-tier power units. Van Rossum didn't waste any time. He and Mike Earl booked a meeting in Germany with Porsche's head of motorsport, and of course, they flew there in Van Rossum's private jet. Now, brace yourself, because this part is wild.
He turned up, and we jumped on the plane, and the young lady said, right, would you like anything to eat? And he said, well, what have you got? So she said, so unfortunately, he decided on an egg mayonnaise baguette, which, when he bit into it, put egg mayonnaise all down his suit, all down his shirt, in his hair, and he was pulling it out of his hair and eating it. And so we arrive at Porsche, and long story. Anyway, in the end, the deal was agreed. And as we leave, absolute confidentiality, nobody must say anything until it's done, and da-da-da-da-da.
No one really knows the full details, since it was supposed to be confidential. But of course, confidential and Van Rossum do not belong in the same sentence. So naturally, the man went on TV and blurted it out to the world.
J'ai assez d'argent moi-même pour le financer si c'est nécessaire. Que j'ai assez d'argent moi-même pour le financer si c'est nécessaire. 2 milliards. Ça, c'est pas un problème.
Porsche, obviously not thrilled about the whole confidential deal announced on live TV thing, pulled the plug and cancelled the agreement, and Van Rossum, oh, he took that very well. He drove his Porsche into a square in Brussels and set it on fire. Like, literally torched the car as a protest, because that's totally how sane people process things. By now, it was pretty obvious the honeymoon phase with F1 was over. Van Rossum looked like he was already bored of the whole thing, and rumours said he was straight up refusing to pay the team's bills, despite being filthy rich.
I didn't get paid the whole year. Not a penny of my contract.
Like, man, you got 100 plus Ferraris, 7 castles, and 2 jets. Pay your damn mechanics, maybe? Anyway, just when you think things couldn't get any weirder, they do. Just before the Belgian GP, Van Rossum decided to give the F1 world another one of his iconic gifts. Out of nowhere, he decided to go full nuclear and pick a fight with the 2 most powerful men in F1, Jean-Marie Balestri, FIA president, and Bernie Ecclestone, F1's management CEO. To Balestri, he said he was senile and anarchist, referencing Balestri's alleged past in the pro-Nazi Vichy military during World War II. And to Ecclestone, oh, just casually called him a mafia boss. Yep, said it and just carried on with his day like he'd ordered a coffee. So how did Balestri and Ecclestone respond? Exactly how you'd expect. They banned Van Rossum for life from entering any F1 Grand Prix, and things only got messier, because right after the Italian GP, Van Rossum fired Gasho.
He was very, very agitated. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, oh, there's an article over here where Gasho has said the team isn't doing this, and the money's not there, and the team's not right, and sack him. And I said, ooh.
Apparently, Gasho had been complaining about him and had finally had enough of his nonsense. But also, rumour has it that his replacement, JJ Leto, managed by Keke Rosberg, was bringing in some much-needed cash. So, hey, maybe Van Rossum just followed the money. At this point, Onyx was a pressure cooker about to blow. Total chaos, drama everywhere. But then, out of nowhere, a miracle happened. At the Portuguese GP, Johansson qualified 12th. Solid, right? But the real shock came on race day.
Berger makes an excellent start in the number 28 Ferrari.
With an ambitious no pit stop strategy and barely any fuel left in the tank.
Tires were absolutely shot to bits at the end. The front tires were just steel.
Then Patrese gains for third, pulls out from the slipstream of Stefan Johansson's Onyx.
We talked about tyres all night and couldn't make our bloody minds up, which is what saved us, because we couldn't decide when to stop.
He somehow crossed the line in
Onyx in third position on the podium for the first time.
So we didn't.
Yes, a podium. Onyx got a podium in their first ever F1 season. Unbelievable. Could this be the breakthrough they needed? The spark that would finally turn potential into results, even in the middle of Van Rossum's chaos? I wish I could tell you that Onyx kept smashing podiums, that fans got tired of their total domination, and that Van Rossum dropped Moneytron 2.0 to save the world, but no. After that miracle podium in Portugal, nothing. Van Rossum kept doing his thing, which mostly meant not giving the team any money.
I had a meeting with Jean-Pierre and Alan and Stefan, and at the sort of end of a very pleasant meal, Jean-Pierre sort of sat up and said, right, you know, you guys, unless you can find £20 million by the end of the month, I'm finished. And I thought he was joking. It's taken me 15, 20 years to get to this point, to have my own Formula One team. But I'm not prepared to work like this.
And without cash, development on the car basically froze. Even so, Onyx somehow finished a pretty decent P10 in the constructors' standings. Not bad for a first season. But Van Rossum, who shockingly didn't manage to lock in a deal with either Porsche or Honda, got bored and bounced.
It was terribly disappointing to think it might stop. And that's probably why we foolishly hung on like grim death to go into the mess that happened the following year.
He just pieced out with his mountain of Moneytron cash, leaving Onyx to deal with the mess. And oh boy, what a mess. With him gone, the team basically turned into a chaotic soap opera.
I remember he called me up. I've never met this guy. I didn't even know who he was. And he calls me, oh, Mr. Monteverdi, I'm the new owner of the team. Oh, nice to meet you. Yeah, well, I'm not going to pay you anything next year. Like, what? It was like a 2-minute conversation. And he ended up, well, you're fired. And I hung up the phone and stuff. That was the end of that.
And by mid-1990, after just 10 races, Onyx completely vanished off the grid. And honestly, it's kind of a shame. Onyx actually had some really talented people and tons of potential. They only made it into F1 thanks to Van Rossum, but plot twist, they also went bankrupt because of him and all the absolutely bonkers decisions he made throughout 1989. I don't think I've ever seen a team boss this wild, but just because he was out of F1 doesn't mean the drama stopped. In 1991, Van Rossum was sentenced to 5 years in prison for, surprise, surprise, tax fraud. But instead of quietly doing his time, what does he do? He founds a political party to try and gain political immunity, supposedly libertarian, but who really knows? And get this, the party slogan? No whining, everybody rich. Honestly, the best political slogan I've ever seen. I think I'd vote for him too. Just like the 3.2% of voters did, landing him 3 seats in the Belgian parliament. Was he genius? A madman? Both? Until he passed away in 2018, Van Rossum never really left the spotlight in Belgium, whether it was giving bizarre economic speeches, ranting about politics, or just doing weird stuff on TV. He was always up to something. And man, I love stories like this. So random, so chaotic, and so unbelievably real. What would F1 be without these kinds of characters?
Kind of miss personalities like him in racing, you know, that's part of the whole thing, you know, very big, flamboyant, you know, well, it makes it interesting.
If you want another story like this one, don't hesitate to check this out. And as always, thank you for watching.